I think by now this series this year and its title, Climate and Innovation Building the Low Carbon Economy Now, should be fairly clear as to its intent. Mostly what we hear is that the future requires a great deal of dynamic and diverse innovation. And the question comes, where does that innovation come from? How do we find the innovation on the scale and at the pace that is necessary? And tonight's lecturer is going to address that question in a very important way. Ezio Manzini is a designer, an architect, an engineer, an educator, a prolific author. He's widely regarded as one of Europe's most prominent thinkers about sustainability and has been so for very many years. Ezio is one of those people who has tirelessly championed the idea that a lot of the innovation that we need is around us and coming from the lives of people who are responding. And it's with great pleasure that I introduce to you Ezio Manzini.
Good evening. Thanks to be here. Thanks to Chris. Thanks to the organizer. Let's start. So I'm going to talk you, maybe before I have to tell you something about my background, because I think that it's always useful to know what is the starting point of a person. As Chris said, I always worked in a design school, in design schools, many different design schools. And from a long time ago, I started to work in what is called strategic design. And now also strategic design and service design. I have to tell this because normally if you say, at least in many places in the world, I teach design, people think industrial product designer. I come from product design, but I moved toward designing something that is more complex artifacts or even strategies. But from the beginning, for me, the interest to move from product design toward strategy and toward service design was because in parallel, I always been very interested to the environmental issue. So I found out that, of course, you can design a product in a very clever way, but more than the single product, you have to look to something that is more holistic if you want to really to do something for the good. So my story, it's long. The bad thing, this means that I'm old. The good thing is that I have a good memory of what happened. So if today I'm going to talk to you about design for social innovation and sustainability, it's because in my view this is one of the most interesting ways for dealing with the issue of sustainability today. But I'd like very shortly to put this idea in a longer framework. And not to tell you all the story, I want only synthesize in a very personal way this story of this quasi 30 years of a mix in between design and sustainability. So the first, the story synthesis is from eco-design or life cycle design or green design, as you want to call it, toward the topic of today, that is design for social innovation and sustainability. The first, and for me most important lesson that we have learned is that to improve the efficiency, or as it told it, the eco-efficiency of a product is very important, but is not sufficient. If you look around us and we confront a refrigerator of today, a car of today, a whatever product of today, with a similar product of 30 years ago, you will find that today they are much, much better by the environmental point of view. So as many people, maybe also in between you and also myself, that I try to promote the idea of the green eco design, we have been very successful. The product per se one by one, are much, much better today than 30 years ago. So, well done. Unfortunately, if you look the overall statistics of the consumption, you can see very easily that even in the country where this kind of eco-design has been more successful, the overall consumption is still growing. This means that even if, I repeat, it's very important to have more eco-efficient cars, more eco-efficient refrigerators, more eco-efficient houses, if you don't do something else, the overall result is a kind of boomerang effect, and at the end, the consumption are still increasing. It's sad to be said. When we discovered that, we was a little bit disappointed, but it is like this. So the different approach has to be a more systemic approach. If you want to say in one word, you have not to talk about car, but about mobility. So what is really sustainable is a different system of mobility. The car per se is not sustainable. The car could be more or less good in environmental terms. But if you transform all the cars that we have around the world today in the most advanced hybrid car, you still will have jam in the traffic. You still could not propose to 7 billion people today and 9 billion people in few decades. You cannot propose a standard of mobility that we have in Italy with every family with 2 cars, and I probably also here, and imagine that this is the way to solve the problem of mobility. So the issue is, let's do better car, okay, but the solution is in rethinking the mobility. The second point that is particularly important in this moment is that the increase in the consciousness of people about the environmental problems, and today the environmental problems are very interlinked with the social problems. So the consciousness of people that we are facing big problems, it's important, but it's not enough. For a long period, for decades, many people, me also, was saying we have to promote, to make people understand that there is a problem. But, well, in the last decades and in the last year, and particularly in the last few years, I will say from the change in the presidency in the United States, the perception of the existence of the problem increased enormously. I will bet that today nobody in the government, in the business, and between normal people could deny that there is an environmental problem and that there is something more deep than an environmental problem. There is a systemic problem in the model that has been the dominant model in the last century. Unfortunately, if the consciousness of this problem increase and you don't offer any consistent alternative, this consciousness can turn in fear, can turn in attitude that are totally different from what we hoped. If you don't have an idea that something positive can happen, you can start to think that you have to protect yourself. And as a matter of fact, the fact that many governments now, they have in agenda the issue that there are a huge problem in the future is the beginning for war. It's the beginning for fighting. It's the beginning to try to keep your resources, to find the resources. Today for the oil, but you know very well that something similar is happening for the water. So if there are no option, no visible option, different, the idea that there are problems create the syndrome of buying a rifle and some potatoes, as has been said by somebody, to protect yourself, your family from the others. This is very important. It's very important to understand that if it is good and necessary that everybody understand that we are facing a problem, if we don't want to have even worse society and worse tensions in our society and war and terrorism, we need to grow alternatives. So people have to understand that there are problems, but at the same time, they have to have some proposition of visions, proposals. They have to have the idea that something else can be done. If this not happen, the situation can be even more dangerous. So, for what regards ourselves, the problem is not only the first lecture. We have to technically improve the quality of the product, but also the quality of the systems. But we have to give more strong visions about how the world could be like. And to give visions and proposals is something that asks for the contribution of many people, but for sure there are some people that are professionally more equipped to generate this vision, who is in the media, who make the movies, and who are designers, different kind of designers. As designer, now I talk for who in between you is a designer, willing or not, I will say not willing, we have oiled the wheels of a machine that has proposed a certain idea of well-being that now is spread all over the world, and we discover that it is totally unsustainable. So we have spread in the world a very dangerous idea of sustainability. I will not make people feel uncomfortable and we did not know that. But now we know it, and so we, the designer, have more responsibility than the others to use our capability to know technology, know the society, imagining something, and making proposals. Third lecture, lesson learned. If we look attentively around us, we can see that the situation is less dark than it could appear. And this will be the main topic of my conversation with you. So the main topic is that if we generalize, if we say what the people want, what the businesses want, what the policymakers are doing, there is no hope. And if you are in Italy, there are less hope than in other places in this moment. But if you really want to do something, you have to say, I exaggerate, people do not exist. Businesses do not exist. Policymakers do not exist. Exist different kind of groups of people, different kind of businesses, different kind of policymaker. And I can assure you that also in Italy you have some policymaker or some officers that are heroes. They do fantastic things. And there are some business people that can recognize something very interesting to be done. And this will be my presentation. If you look in the society in this way, there are a lot of good news. A lot of very interesting things that happen. So, this was the introduction. The first part of my speech is to show you something that probably, one by one, the cases that I will be very short show you, you will say, oh, but I know it. It's also the corner of my street. I've seen it in that place. So, nothing, I think, will be totally new. But I think that maybe the overall vision that will appear could be relatively new. So the good news is that if you look at the society in this not banal way, but searching in the society for good news, you can find a lot of very interesting good news. Not only we have been lucky, when I say we, it means my group. It's not we, me, my group. We had the opportunity to work in several countries around the world, in the north, in the south, in the east, in the west. And we have found out that there are ideas that move very quickly around the world. So you can find an interesting social invention in a place, and in a very short time you find it in another place, interpreted in a different way, but with some similar point. This is the good side of the globalization. So we live in a global world that has many very negative components, but there are also some positive ones. The fact that we are here is one aspect of this, I hope, good side of the globalization, but also the good ideas move very quickly around the world. So I grouped these good ideas for some sectors, moving from the one that, in my view, is the more dynamic and mature one, that is about food and agriculture. I put the two things together because, as is said by many people, every choice regarding food is an agricultural choice. When you choose what to buy, when you choose what you eat, you are choosing something that will happen in the farms. So the two things have to be seen together. And if we consider that, there are a lot of initiatives, as I said, some of them, you know them very well, that could be seen in a new perspective. What is a farmer market? Somebody could say, well, a farmer market is something old as a history of the cities. The farmers go to the city to sell their own products. But the new generation of farmer market, I'm sure that you have farmer market are different. The farmer are conscious farmer. In sociological terms, we could say are reflexive farmers. So are farmers that are conscious that they are doing something important. And the people that goes to the farm, to this market, do not go to the market only because they want 1 kilo of potatoes. They go to this market because it's a way to enter in contact with the farmers. So the farmer market that we can find, I think, in Melbourne, in Italy, in Milano, in New York, and you can find them, for instance, also in India. And it's interesting because the farmer market in India is in parallel with traditional farm market that exist. But it's the beginning of a different way of considering the relationships between the farm and the city. This one is in Colombia, in a place called Cusca. That is interesting because the villagers were really peasants, were really villagers, but if you can look at them, you recognize that they are not the traditional villagers. They are villagers that have been, in some way, leapfrogging from the traditional way to be a farmer toward a farmer that is conscious to do a very important job, that they are selling something that is good for them, for the other, for the environment. And I think that this is very promising because I already used the term leapfrogging. Normally it's used this term in talking about technology, to leap a phase. This is a kind of social leapfrogging. So the possibility in some part of the world to move from some traditional way of doing to a very advanced one, the one that we, in Melbourne or in Italy, we consider as very advanced. And this is the case of the farmer market, or the same could be for the purchasing group. I don't know how you call it, when different people go together to get, again, what? Indirect relation with the user, with the producer. And they can do it for several reasons, for economical reason, for environmental reason, for cultural reason, to be together, to make friends. All the cases that I will present are not cannot be simplified in one thing. This is done for economical reasons, this is done for ideological reasons. They are always a complex of motivations that can change case by case, but they are always partly for economical reason, partly for cultural reason, partly maybe also for some ideological conventions. And you can find purchasing group in Italy, as probably here, but you can find in Brazil, and they have a slightly different meaning. And you can find it, well, I put only these two, but I can guarantee that you can find it in many other places. Another beautiful example is the vegetable gardens. 20, 30 years ago, having a vegetable garden in an urban area was only something for a retired person that has nothing better to do. Today, there are a lot of new vegetable gardens in urban situations that are seen not only as a way to produce some food, not only a way to entertain who do it, but also a way to create some greenery in the city without spending on the side of the city, because there is somebody that do it. They are also, for instance, in Milano, seen as a way to vitalize some park. So you have some part that could be a little bit dangerous. If you make some allotments, this is a way to keep people working, and this creates a safer city. So look, you have this very little thing. Somebody working in these vegetable gardens at the same time is entertaining, is producing food, is increasing the green of the city, is increasing the safeness, the safety of the city. Very interesting, a very little thing. But if you think how it can spread, it became something that could be very interesting and important. And of course, in different places, if you are in Milano or if you are in Melbourne, it's different. If you are in Brazil near a favela, where this could be a way to renew some social fabric and to create not only the food, not only some activities, but also some social benefits. Or the same in South Africa. And staying on the food and agriculture, there is this format that is a worldwide movement. Someone of you know it, maybe with another name. Normally it's called community-supported agriculture. This is the best, in my view, the most mature example. What a community-supported agriculture is to create a kind of twinning in between a farm of a group of farms and some people in the city. And the people in the city, in some way, invest in the farm. So you participate. You know the farm life is complicated, the weather, how will be the harvest this year. So the people in the city participate to this kind of farm life. At the same time, they can go there during the weekend. So it's a place to have an entertainment, a kind of tourism. At the same time, it's didactic. You can bring your kids to see how a living chicken is, and not to think that they are only dead in the supermarket. And by the farmer point of view, it could be seen, inverted comma, as a fantastic marketing and business idea, because they don't have to rent the money from the bank, because they have the money directly from the people at the beginning of the season. If you put all this together, this is a beautiful example of distributed system. Chris Ryan is an expert. It's one of the topics that they are dealing also here, the idea of system that could be distributed when you have shorter chains between the producer and the consumer, and you try to put them directly in contact. It creates greenery. It's a win-win solution because it guarantees for the green parts, agricultural lands that are near to the city, to have a totally different status. Today, when you don't think in terms of 0 miles, 0 miles food, so the food that is coming from nearby where you are living, normally the farm near the city are really poor one, waiting only to sell the ground to some developer. In this way, when you start to think that it's very good to have the food that come from nearby, the farm near the city have a totally different value, and you start to see them as a kind of green belt around the city that have the capability to produce food, to produce entertainment, to give opportunity for some local tourism. And we can find community support agriculture in Europe, in America, I imagine, even if I don't know, but I imagine also in Australia, but you can find it also in other places, for instance in China. I will open and close. I start to say we have not to generalize. In general, if you talk about China, and it's very important to talk about China today for obvious reason, people see some stereotype of what the Chinese want, what the politician in China want. It's true that in the mainstream maybe it's the one that is described as hyper-industrialist, hyper-consumerist, etc., etc. But I can guarantee you, if you have never had the experience to do it, if you go in China and if you search, you can find a lot of very interesting initiatives as the one that we are mentioning now. Our network on design for social innovation has the strongest place in China in this moment. You have to search for it. It's not obvious. They are not in the statistics. You don't see normally on the first page of the newspaper. But if you look a little bit more inside, you can find a lot of very interesting things happening in China, also by this point of view. And when you put all them together, they existed maybe also 20 years ago or 30 years ago, but now you start to see something that outlines a kind of scenario of food. 30 years ago, when you thought to the future of food, there was only one scenario: the agro-food system, highly energy and chemical intensive. No other visions. Today, in many places, I think also here, you can talk about a second scenario about food that is based on organic, that is based on the local, that is based on the rediscovery of the quality of the seasons, that is based on the direct relationship with the farmers, or some form of direct relation with the farmer. So around food, I think that we are really at the beginning of not any utopia, of a very concrete opportunity that, of course, is still a minority. It has to be cultivated, if we want to use an agricultural terminology. It has to be cultivated. It can be killed, but it's real, and everybody understands it. So I will make some other example now more quickly, because otherwise I have also something else. But the food system, in my view, food agricultural system, is very important because the food is something very near to us, and the food is produced in the farms, and the farms are the ones that keep the territory and keep the landscape and keep the majority of the quality of the environment. So we have to understand that what is happening in the system in between food and agriculture is a big part of our life and of what is happening in our environment. Well, a little bit more quick. Around the cities there is a crisis. In cities, more or less big crisis, but in many cities there are the crises, and you know that the future of the population will mostly live in cities that maybe are not cities. This one is a city, Milano is a city, but the new billions of people that will go somewhere, they will not have what traditionally has been a neighborhood, what traditionally has been a public space. So I only evocate one problem. But something is happening. What is happening is that even if the traditional neighborhood in many places is disappearing thanks to the individualization of the population, there are some new kind of neighborhoods that are consciously built. So they are very, again, modern because they are reflexive. It's not the neighborhood that you have from the beginning, it's a neighborhood that has to be built. So you have, this one is in Poland, but you can have everywhere this kind of festival, neighborhood festival, that what they are at the end, they attempt to rediscover a kind of neighborhoodship in between people that has been highly individualized by the process of modernization. And this could be particularly important in cities that have problems. I take this one is Bogota, one of the many examples of cities that has been perceived as very dangerous. So they have an organization that is, could be translated something as let's free from fear. The title is Night Without Fear. And so they organize something during the night in the city to push people, to invite themselves to be in the street, to do something in the street, in some way to reconquire the public space on the streets. You have people that, given the problem that administration could have in managing and taking care of the city, that participate. So neighborhood that together participate in taking care of part of the city. You can have places everywhere in the world, maybe also here, that start and squatted some remaining spaces and transform them in gardens. And we have in Italy, in France, and in New York. If you have been in New York, now they have, I don't know how many, but 100 maybe, very little local gardens. They find a very interesting relationship with the local authority now, so they started squatting it. Now they are allowed to stay there. There is a way to keep it. And if you have a tour of this little garden, they are fantastic. Each one of them is different because it's taken care by different groups. And it's a fantastic organization to maintain some kind of greenery. The possibility to use some asset. There are people that have a house, that have a kitchen, and is able to cook. Why don't you use this capability to organize a neighborhood restaurant? And we have organization in Italy, this is in Denmark, of neighborhood restaurant done in the house of somebody. And if you put all this together, and there are a lot of examples, you have a new idea of city that is added to the traditional city as planning and the traditional cities as architecture that remain. But the rediscovery that the city is mainly done by people that have connection and do something together, and given that the hyper-individualization of the modernization has in some way destroyed this kind of city, they are rebuilding it. And what is the point is that the city is done by group of people. So this group of people has to be rebuilt, or they are rebuilding them, because human beings are social animals. So probably they discover that to be too individual is not so good.